The reshaping of the world as we know it has long been a desire of many, but very few have actually tried to shape it in a way beyond the power of mortals. However, the question on whether or not mortals should have such power and knowledge has long been debated, and that debate continues, especially when it involves divine power. Fewer than 2,000 years ago, to the east in Morrowind, 3 of the Chimer stole such energy, becoming gods in their own right, but this came at a cost. The gods' power would wane over time unless they replenished it annually, and a curse was wrought upon their entire race. One of them fully embraced the change and used his divine power to pursue knowledge, understand the world, and perhaps reshape it. He was known as the Clockwork God, the father of mysteries, or Set, but to most he was called Sotha Sil. All the way back in the First Era, after the founding of the Cameron dynasty in Valenwood, there was an ordinary settlement amidst the Ascadian Isle region of Morrowind. It was called Al-Safa. There was nothing particularly distinctive about this Chimer city. Its people got by. There was a Quama egg mine to provide them with food, as well as a source of income, and it was under the control of a long-forgotten, insignificant House Sotha. Al-Safa's distinctive aspect would come when one of its inhabitants gave birth to a young Chimeri child, who would become a powerful godlike wizard named Sotha Sil. For an unknown number of years, Sotha Sil was raised in Al-Safa along with his sister Sotha Now. The two were apparently close, and he respected his sister greatly. Much of Sil's early life, or in fact a huge amount of his life, is unknown, but memories of his that came to light during the Interregnum allow a glimpse into his childhood. The nursery tale, The Brave Little Scrib, was used by his mother to inspire courage in him. His sister once tried to convince him to enter an area that was off limits, and according to the homilies of blessed Almalexia, one day Set was playing in an egg mine where he saw a number of scribs, the larval forms of the Quama, and began to throw stones at them. Supposedly, a scrib then lifted up its head and begged him to stop, saying that having stones cast at them was suffering and death. This instance taught young Sotha that the amusements of some can be the torture of others. In Almalexia's Fables for Evening, it is written that young Set laid on the grass, gazed up at the stars for hours, and driven by his love for maths, began counting them and gave each a name until he fell asleep. Upon waking in the morning, the stars had disappeared, and he began to cry, for he learned a harsh but valuable lesson. Time cages all tasks. Years went by and all was normal at Al-Safa, until one day, for reasons still mysterious, yet not difficult to reason, the settlement burned in a sea of fire. Sometime in the First Era, Mehrunes Dagon, the Prince of Destruction, arrived and utterly destroyed the home of House Sotha. All but one Chimer perished in the chaos, Sotha Sil. He was apparently rescued by none other than Lord Vivek, though the details of this rescue are sparse, to the extent that there are none. No one knows if there was a battle, or if Sil was trapped among the fire, or everything burned and Sil was the only one left when the flames died. His sister perished along with all the other members of his house, leaving the existence of House Sotha solely to him. At some point following Al-Safa's destruction, a shrine to Mehrunes Dagon was erected in recognition of the god's action. Following the rescue, Sotha Sil and Vivek would become close friends, along with two other Chimers, Almalexia and Induril Nerevar. After a number of years passed following the destruction of Al-Safa, Sotha Sil became an advisor to Lord Indoril, the military commander and representative of the United Chimera people of Resdayn, later known as Morrowind. Vivek became one of his counsellors alongside Sotha. Nerevar had come to call Sil his trusted and wise friend, whom he often relied on for advice. Set eventually gained a number of students and companions whom he taught. Lady Farina Andrano of the prominent Andrano family was one of them. Her spirit would later aid Lord Vivek during a time of crisis in the Second Era. From near the beginning of the Chimera's arrival in Resdayn in the Merithic Era, they had clashed with a race that already laid claim to territory within the land, the lost race of the Deep, the Dwemer. It shouldn't be much of a surprise to find that these two cultures were often at odds with each other, as while the Dwemer preferred reason to faith, the Chimera were adamant Daedra worshippers, but only what they considered good Daedra, Boethia, Mephala, and Azura. However, even these two very different cultures could find common ground in the classic way of a shared enemy. Around 1E240, the Kingdom of Skyrim, the first empire of the Nords, conquered both High Rock and Resdayn, with the exception of the Dwemer Kingdom of Vardenfell. This phase of expansion is known as the Skyrim Conquests, and the Nordic Empire would endure for almost 2 centuries. It wasn't long after this that Saint Alicia's rebellion would crush the Ayleid Empire with help from the Nords, and pave the way for the rise of the First Imperial Empire. A civil war known as the War of Succession in Skyrim eventually erupted before ending in 1E420, causing the Nords to lose their empire. Tired of Nordic oppression, Nerevar and the Dwemer king Dumak formed an alliance between their people and drove the Nords out of Resdayn in 1E416. This unification and successful war against the Nords led to the two peoples into forming the First Council. Indoril and Dumak were named leaders of the council, and under their leadership, Resdayn flourished, and the two cultures saw prosperity that was unparalleled by this time. Sotha Sil's skill with magic was helpful in driving the Nords out of Resdayn, and he was praised for his diplomatic skill as much as being called one of the greatest wizards of his time. Peace existed between the Chimera and Dwemer for over 200 years, but the alliance wasn't appreciated by parties within the two societies. The Dwemer had also found something beneath Red Mountain that would trouble their neighbours. Beneath the mountain, the Dwemer had found the Heart of Lorkhan, a powerful Daedric artifact. The chief tonal architect of the Dwemer, Kagrenak, had fashioned tools he sought to use to tap into the Heart's power and siphon it for themselves, all in an effort to make the Dwemer immortal and create a giant golem they could use to conquer all of Resdayn. But this wasn't Dumak's desire, nor was he even aware of Kagrenak's scheme. When the Chimera found out about this plan, and the friendship between Nerevar and Dumak collapsed, so too did the alliance between their people. After Indoril's council's urges, the Chimera declared war on the Dwemer, and the War of the First Council began. Sotha Sil became a general in the Chimera army during this short war, and alongside Nerevar, Vivek, Almalexia, and Vorin Dagoth, battled Dumak and his Dwemer brethren. The Chimera armies eventually marched on Red Mountain in 1E700, but according to Vivek, though the Dwemer's fortress there was well defended, they managed to draw Dumak's armies out onto the field, where they met their end. Lord Indoril, along with Dagoth and a few companions, ventured beneath the mountain while the battle waged on above. They soon came across Dumak, and the two kings clashed, though it is widely believed Dumak, despite wounding his old friend, was killed. Cagranach, upon seeing the end, turned to the heart of Lorkhan with his tools in hand, and upon using them on the heart, he and nearly the entire Dwemer race disappeared. Though the Dwemer were now gone, Cagranach's tools remained, and Dagoth brought them to Nerevar, who wished to consult his council before taking any action with them and the heart. He trusted his loyal servant Dagoth to stay behind and protect the artifacts until he returned. On the slopes of Red Mountain, Sotha Sil and the rest of the tribunal were informed of what had happened beneath them, and the council gave their counsel. What exactly happened then at Red Mountain is one of the most disputed pieces of Tamrielic history. Even now, with many accounts available, it is difficult to say for certain what happened. All that is known or widely believed is that Indoril Nerevar and his council swore upon Azura to never use the tools of Cagranach and meddle with the heart. Some sources claim that Nerevar died from his wounds at Red Mountain, possibly following a scuffle with Dagoth, who refused to relinquish the tools once his lord returned to collect them. Other accounts state, namely the Ashlander ones, that Nerevar was betrayed and murdered by his three advisors, Vivec, Almalexia, and Sotha Sil. Regardless of the truth, Nerevar died at Red Mountain. It is believed that during the Hortator's absence, Vorin Dagoth had somehow managed to gain divine essence and power from the heart. He then became Dagoth Ur, though the name has been reported to have been used before this by Indoril himself. Vivec later wrote his version of what had transpired following the disappearance of the Dwemer. The tribunal, apparently, all then went below to the heart to collect the tools, but Dagoth refused to give them up, claiming that they were too dangerous, and only he could be trusted with them. Nerevar's party was forced to use force to obtain the artifacts, and Dagoth was defeated. Sotha Sil was then tasked with their safekeeping and began to study them. Years went by, and Set eventually discovered how to use the tools to tap into the divine power of Lorkhan's heart. The wizard informed Vivec and Almalexia of his vision of a new world of peace, with justice and honour for nobles, and health and prosperity for commoners, with them as the immortal patrons and guides of their people. The three went against Nerevar's wish, and broke their oath. They journeyed to the heart once more, and using the tools, transformed themselves into immortal beings with the power of a god. It is written that Indoril once said to Set, "Your guidance and wisdom has been invaluable to me. Where would I be without you? I'll stand beside you, my friend, till the end." How these words, if truly spoken, reflect the friendship of the two, and the gravity of Set's betrayal. Soon after, the Daedric Prince Azura appeared and cursed them for breaking their oath to Nerevar. Sotha Sil fired back at Azura, taunting her, telling her that they no longer needed the Daedra, that their age had passed, and a new one was born, with the new gods of flesh to usher it in. Then, Azura cursed the entire Chimera race. Their skin turned ashen, and their eyes fire red, and from then on they would be known as the Dunmer, the Dark Elves of Morrowind. The Dunmer at first were naturally afraid of their new appearance, but unlike Vivec and Almalexia, Sotha Sil chose to take on this new form, and taught his brethren to look at it as a blessing rather than a curse. He told them to see this as a sign of good change, a sign they had become new civilized Mer that may speak directly to their immortal friends and patrons, the three faces of the tribunal. Most were inspired by Sotha Sil's words, and with encouragement, they set out to create a just and honourable society, and for many years there was peace in Morrowind. However, deep in the bowels of Red Mountain, an old friend was awaiting his return. With the rise of the three demigods, sometimes labelled as the Al-Safa, came the establishment of the Tribunal Temple. This new religious organisation was dedicated to the worship of these three godlike beings, and it would become the most prominent religion in Morrowind. But there were some who refused to bow before them, naming them false gods, and some going as far as to call them traitors of their kind, for betraying and possibly killing Nerevar. If the people of Morrowind knew the truth then of the Al-Safa's condition, perhaps they wouldn't have placed most if not all of their faith in this new pantheon. Their lack of true ascension meant that every year, Sotha Sil and his fellow demigods had to make a pilgrimage to the heart beneath Red Mountain and replenish their divine power. For over 1,000 years, Morrowind had prospered in peace, but following the first Akaviri invasion in 1E 2703, a new threat would come and attempt to subdue the Dark Elves. In the same year of the invasion, Raymond Cyrodiil founded the Second Empire of Men, and after unifying all of Tamriel's human races, set his sights on the Mer. The Second Empire would see its golden age following the year 2806 during Raymond II's reign. By 2837, the Raymond Empire claimed dominance over all of Tamriel, except for Morrowind. Relations between the two domains were already fragile, and partly due to his ambition, Raymond II declared war on the Dunmer. This war would last for 80 years and by the end, devastated both sides. It would go down as the Fourscore War. The war is believed to have been mostly fought around the border regions of Morrowind. Sotha Sil and the rest of the Tribunal proved to be more than capable leaders. Raymond II eventually died while fighting the Dunmer, somewhere between 1E 2840 and 2852. The war was continued by his successor, Emperor Brazolus Dor, whose successor after dying in 2877 was Raymond III. The war almost bled the Empire's resources dry. Morrowind too was exhausted, and the event didn't conclude until 2920, after the Empire captured the fortress of Aldmirac. Around this time, according to the popular historical book series 2920, Sotha Sil had journeyed to the mysterious home of the Sigic Order, the Isle of Artaeum in Somerset. There he was a member, and taught some of the new mages in all forms of magic. Almalexia supposedly went to the Isle to ask Set to return to Morrowind, for she said without him, the Dunmer would lose the war. It is written also that Sotha Sil tried to stop the Morag Tong from assassinating the current emperor. The Tong refused his request, and so he destroyed a ship carrying the Duke of Mournhold's payment to the assassins. Thus the assassination never took place, at least not yet. The Tribunal sat down with Prince Tulek Cyrodiil, and a treaty was negotiated, finally ending the Fourscore War. Some claimed the end result was a stalemate, but others that the Empire were the true victors, for they gained what they desired, the coastlines of Morrowind. Around the time of the war, a town in Valenwood, Gilverdale, also known as Gilverdale, caught the attention of Sotha Sil after Almalexia passed through on her way to Artaeum. By the time she arrived, the town was nothing but a ruin. It had been destroyed by Molag Bal at the request of a mad king. Once Sotha Sil learned of this, he concluded that a pact had to be made with the Daedric. He ventured to Coldharbour, the realm of Molag Bal, via the Dreaming Cave in Artaeum, and there awaiting his arrival was Azura, Prince of Dusk and Dawn, Boethia, Prince of Plots, Hermaeus Mora, Daedra of Knowledge, Hircine the Hunter, Malakath, God of Curses, Mehrunes Dagon, Prince of Disaster, Morlagbal, Prince of Rage, and Sheogorath, the Mad One. He managed to convince the 8 Daedra there to answer only the calls of intermediaries such as witches or sorcerers, but other details such as what they received in return is still to this day unknown. This is known as the Coldharbour Compact. However, this pact failed to stop the destruction of Mournhold, the capital of Morrowind, in the very last year of the First Era. The 2920 series states that following the death of a witch's child, Mehrunes Dagon was summoned in a revenge attack on the Duke of Mournhold. Dagon and his minions eventually attacked the entire city, and before help could arrive, it was utterly devastated. As the city completely fell, Sotha Sil and Almalexia arrived to confront the Daedric prince. The two friends battled the god of chaos, but though the Daedra cannot be killed, or so it is believed, they were able to banish him back to oblivion, although the Lady of Grace was gravely wounded. She was taken to Balmora, presumably by Sotha Sil, and tended to by Vivek's personal healers. Once Vivek arrived by her side, Set returned to working on his machines and sorcery he so often tinkered with, apparently beneath Ebonheart. Thanks to assassins after Prince Julek's meeting with the Tribunal, the Raymond dynasty was over, and the Akaviri Potentate had risen to power. Meanwhile, Sotha Sil was working on his arcane clockwork apparatus when something unforeseen happened. As it is mostly written in 2920 Evening Star, an oily bubble seeped from a long trusted gear and popped. A pipe shifted half an inch to the left. A tread skipped. A coil rewound itself and began spinning in a counter direction. A piston that had been thrusting left-right for a millennia suddenly began shifting right-left. Nothing broke, but everything changed. As he looked up at the night sky, through a crack in the ceiling of the catacombs beneath the city, Sotha Sil realized it was midnight. The Second Era had begun. For the first 400 years of the Second Era, things in Tamriel were on a slow decline, but around 2E430, Potentate Severian Chorak and all his heirs were assassinated. Thus the Second Empire of Cyrodiil collapsed, and the Interregnum commenced. The next 100 or so years saw the formation of the Dagoth Ur Covenant, the Second Akaviri invasion, the formation of the Ebonheart Pact, as well as the First Aldmeri Dominion. Also the Soulburst took place, and finally the Three Banners War broke out. Throughout the years leading up to the war, Sotha Sil had a number of apprentices, especially those of note such as Barilzar, a powerful mage and expert in clockwork magic. At some point, Set created one of his greatest achievements, the Clockwork City. It was a miniature Dwemer-inspired mechanical city that, though physically existed within a globe inside Set's vault, beneath Mournhold and the Dwemer ruin of Bamzam Shend, it supposedly existed outside space and time. Those who wished to enter had to be magically shrunk in order to access it, and it was there that Sotha Sil hoped to forge a future and reshape the world. Some sources dispute the city's location, though it's entirely possible that the globe moved from time to time. Sotha Sil had managed to create creatures known as fabricants, constructs that were part organic, part inorganic. They, as well as various Tamrielic people, inhabited the Clockwork City, and while Sil was away, the Clockwork Apostles governed the Brass Fortress. Though people did enter the city, it was not an easy task, and around 2E583, Daedra was scheming to gain access. Varen Aquilarius, the former emperor of what was left of the Empire of Cyrodiil, prophesied after studying the Elder Scrolls that a war involving the Daedra would come once Sotha Sil opened the gates to his Clockwork City, and that is what exactly happened. At some moment in history, the Clockwork God had created a powerful staff called Sunara. This weapon was stolen and came into the possession of an Ashlander called Karnun Chodala, who would go down in history as one of the failed incarnates of Indoril Nerevar. A detailed plan to enter Sotha Sil's city had been planned by Clavicus Vile, one of the Daedric princes not bound by the Coldharbour Compact, and of course his servant, the shape-shifting Barbas. Karnun used Sunara to drain the divine power from Vivec, which once in the hands of the Daedra, allowed them to locate and enter the Clockwork City. Barbas then prepared for the arrival of his master down in the reservoir. However, thanks to the efforts of the Soulless One, the hero who helped thwart Molag Bal's invasion of Tamriel, along with Barilzar, the plot was foiled. However, soon after, Sotha Sil and his city were under attack once again. The Daedric Prince of Night, Darkness and Luck, Nocturnal, summoned Sotha Sil's shadow in an attempt to control the Clockwork City by replacing him as ruler. Meanwhile, one of the Clockwork Apostles, Chancellor Gascoigne de Sant, promised to deliver the fabled skeleton key to Clavicus Vile after it was found by a factotum, a mechanical construct of the Clockwork God beneath the brass fortress. Although, the talking Daedric crows of the Black Feather Court entered the city from Nocturnal's realm of Evergloam and stole the key. Once again, the Soulless One aided the Tribunal in stopping the Daedric offensive. Along with the help of the ancient sorcerer Dagoth Ur and the Clockwork Apostles, they uncovered the plot, but were unable to secure the skeleton key before it was taken by Sotha's shadow. Pursuing the shadow, the Soulless One, Fear and Protector Lucian Apollo found the Clockwork God trapped and successfully defeated his shadow, bringing an end to Nocturnal's scheme. Sotha Sil gave the skeleton key to his old friend Dagoth for safekeeping, and the years went on throughout the Second Era, with the Tribunal continuing to care for Morrowind, and Set ruling over and working on his city. Following these events, the Isle of Artaeum reappeared after 500 years. The first Old Mary Dominion eventually dissolved, and a new one was formed in 830. The Tiber Wars began 22 years later, and in 882, an old acquaintance and his kin awoke beneath Red Mountain. Documents prepared by Tribunal Temple scholars and agents of Vivec detail what happened around 2E882 and 3E417. In 2E882, Sotha Sil, along with his close friends Vivec and Almalexia, journeyed to Red Mountain for their annual power replenishment. But when they arrived, an awoken Dagoth Ur and his ash vampires were there to greet them. Dagoth Ur and his minions drove the Tribunal away before they could access the heart of Lorcan. Eventually, the three returned with forces of their own and sought to force their way into the Heart Chamber and slay their enemy. And this was not the only time they tried, but no matter if they did, Dagoth Ur and his kin would be later revived by the Heart. With the ascension of Dagoth came a second beginning of the Sixth House, and slowly over 400 years they became a growing problem. At some point, when the Tribunal realised they couldn't destroy Dagoth Ur, they erected the Ghost Fence, an expansive magical wall surrounding the crater of Red Mountain. It was an effort to contain the threat of the Sixth House, designed to keep their monsters at bay. and stop the harmful blight-ridden ash storms that Dagoth Ur had conjured from spreading. House Dagoth would slowly keep establishing bases, and cultists would spread across Vvardenfell, eventually being present in every town. However, in 3E417, things took a dire turn when Sotha Sil and Almalexia lost the powerful artifacts Keening and Sunder. They apparently had to be rescued by Vivec and his buoyant armigers, but without the artifacts. The three returned to their capitals and focused much of their power on the Ghost Fence, but they grew weaker and weaker. It is believed that by this time, Sotha Sil had become greatly detached from the world, the affairs of the Dunmer, the rest of the Tribunal, and eventually all of Tamriel. The loss of Keening and Sunder was the last known affair where Sotha was outside his Clockwork City. The Tribunal's defeat at Red Mountain was the last his friend Lord Vivec had heard from him. Eventually, in 3E427, the Nerevarine came to Morrowind and fulfilled the prophecy, bringing an end to the Blight and Dagoth Ur. But as a result, the Heart of Lorkhan disappeared from Tamriel, or was simply destroyed. Either way, the Tribunal would never again restore their power, and began to rapidly lose what they had remaining, becoming mortal once more. Following the heart's disappearance, Sotha Sil created a mechanical heart that his Clockwork City could draw power from, but although this would endure, Set himself would not. The Clockwork Wizard, aside from experimenting with Dwemer contraptions, artifacts and various forms of magic, seemed to have experimented somewhat on himself. At some point before 2E583, Sil had replaced his left arm with an advanced robotic limb. By 3E427, it appeared as if almost half of his body was machinery, possibly indicating that he really did lose touch with everything beyond his own reality. After the Blight was ended, the Nerevarine travelled to the Dunmer capital of Mournhold in an attempt to find out why Dark Brotherhood assassins were trying to kill them. Eventually, the Nerevarine recovered for Almalexia Barilzar's mazed band, a powerful ring that allows one to summon fabricants and teleport between Vivec City, Mournhold, and the Clockwork City. Why the declining goddess needed such an item was beyond those surrounding her, but all soon started to come together after an attack on Mournhold. A number of Sotha Sil's fabricants suddenly attacked the city's Plaza Brindisi Doran. The Nerevarine aided the city guard in eliminating the threat, and investigated a passage that had appeared in the plaza, leading to a once unknown Dwemer ruin, Bam's Amshend. With the Tribunal's power fading, Almalexia resorted to using a weather machine found within this ruin to display power that she no longer had. Before long, she tasked the Nerevarine with forging Indoril Nerevar's broken sword, True Flame, and with a little help from a Dwemer spirit, they did just that. Now there was one final thing left for the Incarnate to do. Kill the so-called Mad God. No, not Sheogorath, but Sotha Sil himself. Almalexia had led others to believe that the wizard had become unstable, weary of mortal imperfections, and unleashed his fabricants on Mournhold, becoming a danger to all of Morrowind. True Flame was forged as it was a weapon that could kill Sotha, but it wasn't the blade of Nerevar that dealt the final blow. When the Nerevarine happened upon the lifeless body of Sotha Sil hanging from his own contraption, it was then made clear that it was not he who went mad, but his longtime friend, Almalexia. She had descended into madness after losing her divine power. It was she who brought the fabricants to Mournhold in an attempt to appear as saviour to her people, and it was she who killed Sotha Sil in his very own city. But the wizard never spoke nor whispered as he died. Even in death he mocked Almalexia. Mother Morrowind then attempted to eliminate the Nerevarine and use him as a martyr, but the Incarnate avenged Sotha Sil, and although Vivek may have still lived afterwards, this was more or less the end of the Tribunal. It is believed that Set was relieved by his coming death. Hardly anyone believed the Nerevarine when they spoke of Sotha Sil and Almalexia's death, but eventually, after the collapse of the Tribunal, the three were renamed saints in the new temple religion that reinstated the worship of Boethia, Mephala and Azura. Though Sotha Sil and his fellow Tribune may have been false gods, their impact on the world was great. Set himself was a guiding hand for many, as in life he often counselled and protected mortals. His Coldharbour Compact may have saved thousands from the Daedra. His efforts to understand the world and its mysteries may have provided great opportunity for others. He was an inspiration to mages throughout history, and managed to comfort his people when they became the Dunmer, as well as in times of crisis. Though for all the potential good he may have done, his actions may have also had adverse effects. What would the world be like had Sil not unveiled the secrets of Kagranak's tools? Where would Morrowind have been without the Tribunal? Such questions are too big to try and answer, and perhaps it wouldn't have mattered in the eyes of Sotha Sil, for he believed that his actions were already set in time. Thus the morals mattered little, as to him they were inevitable. Perhaps even today, or in the future, his attention to the littlest details, his determination to perfect, may actually have implications as he once stated. Regardless, Sotha Sil was a remarkable being, as well as a questionable one, and with his death at the hands of his old friend, came the end of House Sotha, for in 3E427, the house had lost its final member.